Welcome. I'm Terry Kramer, Faculty Director of the Easton Technology Management Center here at UCLA. And I'd like to personally welcome you to 2022 Innovate Conference. This is our flagship conference on everything tech. And if we look around the world today, look at our daily lives, there isn't a day that goes by that we don't see examples of technology-based innovation and technology disruptions. And these are affecting almost every industry, every sector, every company. Every company today is becoming a digital company. The other interesting issue that has happened is the overlay of COVID-19. COVID-19 in many cases massively accelerating adoption of technology and fundamentally changing the idea of place, where we work, where we shop, where we're entertained, where we seek healthcare, et cetera. So when we were coming up with ideas and themes for this conference, we said, listen, we really want to better understand what are the new normals that are likely to happen longer term as a result of this intersection of technology and COVID. How will we change permanently the ideas about where we shop, where we work, et cetera? We'd like to also understand business models and how business models are changing. Let me share my screen just to set the context on a couple of these fundamental changes that we're seeing out there. And then we're going to get kicked off here with our lead speaker. So I've got a couple of slides, as I mentioned. This first slide is a poll that was conducted by Slack. Slack, as many of you know, is the messaging platform recently acquired by Salesforce. And they polled a variety of employees all over and asked them, where do you want to work? 72% of workers said they'd like to work in a hybrid mode, combining home and office. Only 16% said that they'd like to work just from an office. When you look at other areas of industry changes, and I'll give you an example here in shopping, where people shop. So the whole idea about COVID and how that's changed where we buy. If you go to prior to COVID, about 19% of all retail sales were online. If you fast forward to the most recent survey, and this was done by McKinsey, 25% of all retail transactions are online. So about a 30% increase in online sales and penetration of online sales. So big changes there. If you look at healthcare and what's happened with healthcare, this is a survey done by the American Psychiatric Society. And they basically asked people, where do you want to receive healthcare? 43% of adults said that they plan to use telehealth services after the pandemic. So obviously huge uptake in telehealth during COVID. And this is saying even after COVID, the adoption rate is likely to remain very high. If you look at entertainment, where we want to be entertained and watch movies, similar story. This is a survey done by Statista, a big marketing research firm. They asked what percent of people strongly prefer going to a movie theater. If you look back at 2018, 28% said they'd like to go to movie theaters. Only 14% said that they'd like to go to movie theaters in the current environment. If you look at the opposite question here, what percent of people prefer streaming solutions? Back in 2018, only 15% wanted a streaming solution like Netflix. Today, that number is up to 36% strongly prefer streaming. So big change there. And then finally, if we look at kind of what I view as the wrapper around all of this, and this is going to be the lead into our time with Gayle Sheppard, if you look at the sales in public cloud services and really assume that public cloud sales are a proxy for the digitization of companies of all types that then powers innovation of all types. When you look at the total sales of public cloud services in 2020, it was about $270 billion. And this is for all aspects of cloud computing, platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure as a service. That $270 billion is likely to get up to about $400 billion by the end of this year. That would represent a 47% increase in cloud sales. And matter of fact, if you look at infrastructure as a service, so what Azure is a leader in, what AWS is a leader in, Google Cloud, et cetera, that number almost doubles in that same time frame. So we're seeing a huge shift in adoption of cloud computing. So all of this gets to our agenda for the day. We've got three incredible speakers that, again, will help us understand new business models, new normals, all related to technology and technology with COVID. Gayle Sheppard is one of the most senior execs at Microsoft Azure. We have Keith Kratzberg, who's the president and CEO of Epson America. And then we have Linda Jojo, executive vice president of technology and chief digital officer for United Airlines. We'll take very short breaks in between each of these, and we'll have a chance to really get into a lot of the detailed issues. So let me now launch into introduction of Gail. I've had her speak before at UCLA, and we just knew we needed to have her come back. She's got deep and unique experience in technology. And in technology, she's worked for startup companies and she's worked for large enterprises. Currently, she's the corporate VP and head of global expansion and digital transformation at Microsoft Cloud plus AI. Now, with 50% of Microsoft's business outside of the US, Gail develops and leads teams that are responsible for Azure's global cloud expansion for both public and sovereign clouds. She's a key leader that has driven an ecosystem in the emerging markets. And her team have a leadership role in engineering and operations for strategic workloads for SAP, for high performance computing, virtual machines, and mainframe platforms. In addition, she's responsible for related acquisitions and future technology development. Prior to this role, she was the GM VP of Saffron AI. Saffron AI is an AI ML business unit that was ultimately acquired by Intel. She was originally the founder, CEO, and chair of Saffron prior to its acquisition by Intel. She's also held leadership roles at PeopleSoft and JD Edwards with expatriate assignments, leading and building market positions in Asia Pacific and Japan. She serves on the board of directors of Nutanix, which is a global leader in cloud software and a pioneer in hyper-converged infrastructure solutions that make the cloud invisible, freeing customers to focus on business outcomes. She also serves on the advisory board of Nova Signal, which is a med tech company that helps doctors and patients detect disease using robotics and AI. She received her bachelor's in business administration from the University of South Florida. And as a reminder for today's session, I'm going to ask Gail a series of questions to get a better sense of her point of view on a lot of these areas on business models and areas of innovation. We'll then go to a moderated Q&A using Slido. So just go to slido.com, SLIDO.com, enter in the event code for this first session, Innovate, and the number 1, Innovate 1. You can either enter in your own question or you can upvote one of the existing ones, and I'll endeavor to ask the most popular questions. So Gail, let me just start out with you and a huge welcome. It is wonderful to have you back to UCLA.
Thank you, Terry. It's delightful to be here. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to talk with you and your students, your alum and partners. So thank you very much for the opportunity and the invitation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Gail, let me kick it off. You've had a very interesting leadership career, as I briefly described there. Tell us a little bit more about the leadership journey and what were the things you learned, you saw, the opportunities, the challenges along the way?
Well, it was not a brief journey. Let me put it that way. There are a couple of things that stick out now in this long career, and I've broken them into 3 defining moments, probably, Terry. You know, one of them actually starts with running a construction company. The second was building businesses in Asia Pacific and Japan, and the third is building a startup. All the way through to a successful exit. And now, of course, at Microsoft, which would be number 4. But running a construction company is sort of the thing. When I say that, everyone goes, excuse me. But a year out of university, having joined a software company as a systems engineer, my father called me. My father was had built a construction company in Florida. He asked me to consider leaving software industry for a while and to come over and run his company while he took a break. Now, notable, I've been active in the family business since the age of 12, so it wasn't a complete surprise. But after discussion with my father, my two older brothers, I took on the role. And I was, really young, and I made a whole bunch of mistakes, more mistakes than I can remember. I survived that, and as importantly, so with the business. But there were two important learnings then that carry onward. One of them is the power of your team, your employees, the transparency in which you interact, and then also carrying on that transparency to the power of customer focus and serving customers. And without either of these, without doing these two things really well, you can't be successful in a business that's very service oriented, as the construction industry is. But frankly, I don't think you can be successful pretty much in anything. So they are foundational to my core. And I think, if I carry that forward, I think about respect, setting expectations that are mutually achievable and established, right? To resolve problems thoughtfully. And when there appears to be no easy answer, to work it out together. These are the types of things that that have carried on with me throughout life, and I think that transparency builds trust, and trust builds the ability to work through anything together is part of the theme. The other thing that happened to me in construction industry, I worked in a very diverse workforce. It wasn't diverse in terms of gender, but certainly in terms of culture and race. And so I had the opportunity to work in a male-dominated culture, and the care and respect I received from construction managers, project managers, the teams was immense. And I think often they were probably curious as to why I was there, maybe incredulous as to why I was doing this in the first place at that age, as well as just in an industry that was so male-dominated. But it was a wonderful learning experience for me. And I think the fact, and I will say this again probably a few times throughout our talk, is a growth mindset, curiosity, asking questions, listening well, leaning in, understanding what you don't know, and respecting those who know it. Right. That was the thing that opened up the world for me with this team of individuals, and being present, being out on the job site, being in the manufacturing plant, right, being in the warehouse, and asking questions and talking to all workers was just part of that growth. So that would lead me to heading later in my life back into the software industry, by the way, a few years later. And a few years after that, I would head over to Asia Pacific, as you noted, to help J.D. Edwards grow their Asia Pacific markets prior to IPO. And so there I head into Hong Kong, where we will be based. And my role was really a very much a customer-facing, field-facing role, right? Build sales team, build service organizations, work with partners, and really build up the ecosystem to grow J.D. Edwards business in 15 countries around Asia Pacific. That included China and Japan. And so here I am in a culture, and cultures, not just a culture, cultures that I know very little about and have little experience in. So again, a growth mindset is going to be really important in this process. And interestingly, so I spent the first couple of years in Asia Pacific broadly, but there became an opportunity to take on the leadership role in Japan, the president of Japan's subsidiary. And I did volunteer for that role, and literally raised my hand on a flight between Hong Kong and Tokyo during a discussion about leadership, and said, I can do that. And all the men I was talking to at the from headquarters at JD said, but I'm sorry, you're a girl. And I said, I know that. This was a long time ago, right? I mean, it was you, right? And we knew each other really well. And I said, yes, I am. But more importantly, I'm an American software executive with a lot of skill that our customers are going to care about. And so I did took the role, was given the role, and onward. But I think the lesson there, of course, was don't be afraid to ask for what you think is possible for you to do, right? And strive to go do that. Well, later I would return from Japan over back to headquarters, which was in Denver, Colorado at the time, and I would take on the role of worldwide sales. And that would lead me inevitably to my first startup with American Express. And from there, I would head to PeopleSoft. But from PeopleSoft, when I left PeopleSoft, when it was merged with Oracle, I took on an entirely new venture, which was to become a late founder and CEO of Saffron Technology, which was associative memory technology that was one shot, few shot learning in its origin as opposed to deep learning, way ahead of its time at that moment. But we built a company that would focus in on defense, financial services, anti-money laundering, fraud. We worked in healthcare, we worked in manufacturing, and the company would be acquired by Intel. So I spent 3 years with Intel. I continued building the organization at that point in time. But I think the time in Saffron, it was a long journey, very, very difficult, building a startup with very little funding. Most of it was self-funded and angel investors, to be acquired by a company with the prestige of Intel, and then onward to grow a business within that company was probably the most exciting part of my career until I reached Microsoft a few years later.
Wow. By the way, Intel is how we met you.
That's right. That's
One
right.
of my former students, Jake Graham, introduced us. And you've got these great roles at Intel and at Microsoft that are big UCLA employers and very good partners and all that, which has created obviously a great win-win.
Yep. Yeah. So those are the highlights of my career, Terry. And through our chat today, there will be opportunities, I'm sure, to talk about how some of that plays out here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the growth mindset, the asking questions of customers must suit your work in leadership and technology especially well, where things are agile and they're changing a lot. And on that topic, Gail, tell us about technology today. I mean, when you look at all the enabling technologies, high-speed mobile networks, obviously AI, cloud computing, Internet of Things, what are you most excited about? What are the things that are transforming your customers' lives the most?
Gosh, yes. Well, one thing that probably excites me the most is the convergence of AI, machine learning with high performance compute, weather and climate. This topic alone is a big one. And we're working very closely with the Met Office UK to bring the next generation of supercomputing to them, as well as work with them in terms of democratizing climate research. And I think it's a brilliant idea that we're working on inside my team, but also with our customers on how do you take, if there are 5 or 6 countries in the world that have the most complete weather data, how do you take that and make it available to other countries in the world with less resources, less assets, less compute capability, to translate that into trends, climate change trends, and how do you take those understandings of the change that's underway and be prescriptive about how to improve it? So that's probably one of the most exciting advanced topics that I see on the innovation front. But I also think that AI itself is still a considerable opportunity for innovation. If you think about the fact that, first of all, it was very noisy a few years ago, very popular to talk about it. Everybody was talking about it. What does it mean? We were really focusing in on bias and ethics around AI, and those things are really important. But we were able to create some standards around that and sort of calm it down a bit, if you will. But what's interesting to me is that the work there continues. And so AI and machine learning, as we predicted, has become pervasive in our daily lives. And you can see even the agents, the intelligent agents working on our phones, whichever model they might be, is becoming smarter and smarter as they learn about us, but also as they're trained. And the enormous amount of data available to the providers of these agent technologies to train the agents to learn more about us as well as the world. And so I think the use of AI is probably still, for me, one of the most exciting innovations underway, and we've just begun to see some of the benefits of it. But there's considerable more ahead.
Yeah. Let me ask you on cloud computing itself. We hear a lot about edge computing. Can you tell us your thoughts on edge computing, applications there? When is it going to be we see it everywhere, et cetera?
I'll give you some good examples. How about that? And let's start with the Microsoft cloud, right?
Yeah.
Because it all sort of begins with the cloud, which was built understanding the computation, storage, data latency issues, security for the volumes of data and the demand for use ahead. And the IoT, imagining the IoT and the edge was part of that. Because when the edge came online, so to speak, and our phones are a great example of edge devices and the amount of interaction and data that we're creating individually every day. When the edge arrives, the ability just to process this amount of data was beyond our capabilities a few years ago. So the cloud provides the sheer computational loads of AI software and AI compute. Think about that. This would not be affordable or available to many without the cloud, right? So cloud, first of all, sort of democratizes access to the ability to have computation and storage and do it with latency that's acceptable and security that's required that we wouldn't have without the cloud. We also think about the investment in the cloud. We have over 65 regions alone at Microsoft, one of the largest footprint in the world. We have 660,000 miles of fiber and subsea cable is required, right? And 170 plus edge sites around the world are in place today. So first of all, in my role as a leader inside global expansion, it's exciting to be in the middle of this, but think about the fact that we really are empowering every person and every organization in the world to achieve more through the cloud. Now let's take that to the edge. And I want to tell you a story about FarmBeats, an Agra story and edge, because it sort of brings it all together. If you think about the fact that the world's food production must increase by 2050 by just sheer population increase, Africa alone doubling within that time. The challenges to do this are twofold. There's the amount of arable land available to us, as well as receding water levels. So how do we become more efficient in the areas of food production where we are in place that we have in place today? And so the possibilities are enormous, right? We can have more efficiency and transparency in the system. We can yield better profitability and more equity across the agri environment or ecosystem. So it's not just the large producers, all can participate in this. And one of the ways to do that is getting data from systems and combining the data that we might have from the systems that are in use, whether it be the machines that are actually producing or plowing fields, or watering, or all of the systems, if you think about the complex systems required actually to grow food. What if we can take the data from that and the insights from that data, combine it with what would be the experiential data of farmers, the knowledge that they have through experience, and put these two things together to improve the system. So we did that. And it all starts with a large portfolio of technology that begins with sensors. So we got to have sensors which help us measure weather and basic temperatures and things like that. We bring those sensors into the IoT platforms, which gives us small, cheap, and disposable real-time monitoring that was not available before. This allows us to capture data and either send it to the cloud or process it on the edge, providing greater visibility and traceability of food, for example, throughout the supply chain. Then we go to automation, such as robotic milling stations for dairy and autonomous tractor applications, add in some imagery to this. So now we have satellite data, which has been used for years, but now we have these, low Earth orbit satellites, which allows us to get much clearer transparency and higher visibility to what's below. And that allows us to monitor crop disease and other things that were not possible before. We build trust through blockchain because smart contracts and traceability can be ensured with blockchain technology. So sellers, buyers, and consumers have higher confidence that the source of the food that they have and its transit is secure and has been protected and therefore not compromised. And then we convert data to action. So we're collecting a lot of data along the way. We have AI machine learning platforms now that help us to readily embed these machine learning techniques into our applications. So we get greater insights. Augmented intelligence is on its way here. And then we can survey everything with computer vision. So we can pretty much see everything that we couldn't see before with great granularity, including, identifying specific pests on a given leaf within a crop. And so now we have efficiency, we have visibility and transparency, and we have greater crop production and outcomes as a result, producing more food. That's a great edge story.
It sure is. I do a case in my tech management class on Bayer Monsanto. Bayer bought Monsanto, that bought a company called Climate Corp. Right. And the whole thing is, they may be a customer of yours, but it's all about how much land is available on the planet for agriculture, which is very limited, and the population growth that's astronomical, threefold increase in population, and I think 20-30% growth in land. You need to be more productive with agriculture, and what you're describing is empowering that.
Right, it's really much so. And you can see the portfolio of technology that had to come together, right, to affect that. And all of that interacting with cloud as well as local devices in the fields.
Yep. Let me shift on now, Gail, to the new normals and COVID-19. So I shared a few slides about massive transformations about where people are working. Everything is shifted remote, where people go for healthcare, where they're watching movies and everything else. Tell us about your view about what COVID has done that you've seen that's so pronounced, and where do you see the current activities being new normals, that they're not going to change. They're not going to revert back to the good old days. And it's part of the way we're going to live our lives going forward.
Yeah, well, I'll try to break that down into a couple of areas, but I thought your opening comments regarding the survey, about 72% of the people surveyed don't want to return to at the office only. They want a hybrid work environment. A few want to be in the office for a variety of reasons. And so being able to accommodate actually the variability in the workforce is probably one of the biggest changes we'll make. It's not one or the other, but will be a hybrid environment that we encourage, that allows for each and every single one of us as workers to be our very best, right? So I think that's the one magnificent change here. I was listening to you also talk about some of the things that have changed personally for us. So when we just think about our personal lives, moving aside work for a moment, telehealth. Will you ever go back to the doctor, get in the car and drive, or the train, or however you get to a doctor, and go there and wait and, do all that ever again, unless you absolutely have to? I don't want to, right? No, it's the efficiency for human life has been improved dramatically through the changes that we've had to make. The way we shop, the way we shop for everything has changed. How we choose to have it delivered, pick it up, whatever it might be, and it changed the business models for all those companies, right? Who created, not only delivered things that they didn't have to deliver in the past, but also created very secure ways to pick up what you purchase, should you wish to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I find the choices that we have much greater, being able to, the amount of streaming technology that we have in our homes, and be able to watch movies in the comfort of our homes versus go to a theater. All of that has been life-changing, and I don't think we'll return to any normal that we realized pre-COVID. The other thing that I think is really interesting has been the collaboration tools like the one we're using right now, and how we interact together. Mm-hmm. I was sharing with someone the other day that I felt like I had more intimacy sometimes in a Teams call at Microsoft, the tool, our collaboration tool, than I did actually in the conference room. Yeah. Because it's just you and them. You're having a one-on-one with someone in particular. You're able to see facial expression and look at each other in a slightly different way than I recall being able to do so in a one-on-one in my office. And I found that interesting. And when we talked about that with a team of people, and we sort of all agreed that you could create intimacy, interestingly, through these collaboration tools. And that was going to be important for teamwork. I think that a couple other things that are important, however, to probably call out is that it's also challenging, right? So the lack of human interaction, in true touch human interaction, is one of the things that has also been injected during this time that people crave and desire. And so I think what we should find and can find is that we're going to in my particular group, we're going to find ourselves going back to work to have meetings that are important where we're whiteboarding and actually together to create new ideas. We're going to find ourselves continuing to work in a hybrid environment where it's more productive for us to be in our own home offices or wherever we might be doing that from, and to cycle through the intensity of our work days, while at the same time being able to be close to the things that matter in our personal lives, and for that to be immediately accessible post-work or even during breaks, during the breaks we have during the day. So those are some of the things. Let me pause there and let you think about that and ask some more questions. We can talk about this one for hours.
Oh, absolutely. There's a whole bunch of examples. And Mavic, one of the questions that came in that got upvoted a lot was your view on the metaverse. Obviously, Microsoft just bought Activision Blizzard, for gaming and all that. But this whole idea of virtual reality, augmented reality coming together, where there's this basically digital world that we're going to be entertained in, that we're going to meet people in. And
yeah.
Do you think, that all sounds quaint, but it's 20 years from now? Or do you say, no, we got all the ingredients now, this is going to happen and we should pay attention?
Yeah, well, we've already been doing a lot of that for training, right? On the job training and in particular in industries where it's important to be able to simulate to simulate reality in order to have safety, right? To understand, where the potential is for risk and manage and mitigate risk prior to actually doing something live. So some of that's already in place. I'm actually excited about it. I think it has, for someone who's always learning, it provides a whole new way of learning. So one of the things I love about it is I can experience things that I would never be able to experience, learn from them, and then use that in my day-to-day life. So I think the metaverse idea provides for great learning and opportunity. The fact of meeting people that way, I haven't really gone there yet, but I'm looking forward to experimenting with that. I think that's going to be kind of fun. Yeah. And then, getting involved. Let's say you want to learn about how to cook something very complicated to cook. You actually can participate in these types of experiences, learn from them. Do it, but you've done it in a very high touch virtual environment. So I don't know, Terry, I think it's pretty exciting. I don't know how you plan to use it, but those are some of the ways I think about it. Yeah. And then experiencing, movies and, being in the movie versus watching the movie will also be kind of fun to do.
Yeah, I love it. And I like some of the enterprise applications you talk about because the use case is much more concrete in here and now, and then it can expand to this kind of broader consumer application.
Absolutely. Yeah. But, for the workplace training, the whole idea of, I talked a moment ago about, arriving in person to do brainstorming, but literally being able to design things together virtually in that kind of environment would be amazing to do.
Yeah. Excellent. Let me ask one other quick question before I go through my previous questions I was going to do, because one of the questions that was asked was about serverless computing. And when do you think that customers are going to adopt that, and how will that operate, et cetera? And maybe explain to people what serverless computing means exactly.
Yeah, well, if people are adopting it, and basically is the opportunity to not have to configure your server environment, but to let us do it for you automatically as you scale up and scale down. So the idea of it, or at least one of the early ideas of it, was how to help people who are adopting the cloud with scale up, scale down activities, because some businesses, gaming might be a great example to start with, where the volumes scale up really fast. If you had to dedicate servers to that for long periods of time, whether they're in use or not, that would be a waste of capacity. So being able to scale back down again would be important. And you see that in retail and other organizations where, they might have high traffic, high profile events, and then they scale back down again. So for a startup is perfect, because in a startup environment, you don't know what you don't know, first of all, and you are having to commit to certain server configurations, which cost, which would therefore have to be paid for whether used or not. So originally, as I was thinking about serverless environments coming from a startup, startup mind frame, that certainly one of the big benefits of it. But even for large corporations, as they're scaling new businesses and also peak periods, serverless allows for us to manage it for you and for it to be automated based on your patterns of use.
Perfect. Very, very helpful. Let me shift now, Gail, to leadership and your insights on what leadership requirements exist today, your kind of secret sauce in a couple of areas of context here. One is, I assume in your day-to-day life at Azure, you're having to help your customers go through a digital transformation about how they're using data, how it affects their products, their operations, everything else. How do you think about leadership in terms of impact on customers that are going digital and your own journey there? And then tell us about the COVID-19 aspect of leadership when a workforce all of a sudden has to go remote. And to your earlier points, how do you keep the sense of team together? Give us your kind of secret sauce on leadership.
Okay, well, that was there's a lot there. First of all, I think the role of leadership took center stage in a way it hadn't before. There's actually a conversation before COVID about the need for managers. Mm-hmm. Had managers become obsolete? Mm-hmm. And then when you think about the model coach care that was required, has been required during COVID, where people on my team, people I know, have gone through some very tough times. I want us to think about this for just a moment. We had families who have children who go to school and have parents and or nannies, whatever their circumstances were, but had help taking care of children and had backup for how to take care of those children. All one day, and two parents with jobs. One day, children come home. Parents are working from home. Grandmother and grandfather can't visit because they're older and high risk, and so isolated from their families. And so all the support systems that were known went away. And now we have families dealing with real-time education occurring for their children. Some children are too young for education, can't go to daycare, et cetera, are now having to be cared for, and chaos ensued for our employees and their life. And so the first thing that happened was, how do you help them, everyone, adjust, adapt, and get through that? And that required a tremendous amount of flexibility on everyone's part to work through that. One is just understanding it, how hard that is. And two, then is putting the systems in place to support it. And so that for me became the basis of change for how I thought about the people I work with, how I thought about how I interact with them, how I thought as a leader I help them. And the transparency, asking how we're doing, asking how you are, right? Starting meetings rather than, okay, here's the agenda, let's go. It's allowing for some time in the very beginning of the meeting to talk. How are you doing? What's going on, et cetera? How's the weather down in Atlanta? I heard it was snowing, whatever it might be. And so I think that camaraderie over time, we would find the way to work together and do it virtually. And some of us have never met in person before. We've hired people remotely, right, and virtually. And so, but still, you have to. The only way to do that is be human. The only way to do that is allow for conversation, allow for humor, allow for people not to be on camera who don't want to be on camera. Come on camera when you do, and just the flexibility and variability of individuals, their lives that they're dealing with while working in these circumstances. So that was year one. And as we rolled into year two of the COVID situation, Microsoft did a fantastic job of just managing that, informing us, keeping us up to date of what was going on in the world, what the state of COVID was, and making sure that we were aware of the environment around us, as well as the programs available to us. And they were and they were very, very thoughtful. Their leadership was very, very thoughtful about making sure that we had the support we needed. Also, the tools we need. And so I would say that the thing that we saw with our customers is very similar. We saw rapid adoption of collaborative technology such as Teams and our competitors. We saw rapid embracement of continuing business, but also building relationships virtually. Taking the time to build relationships and talk individually and personally, just like you would, grabbing coffee or tea as you start a meeting and you haven't in the very early beginning of a meeting. So that personalization of the relationships has become really important. And then I think the other thing I really like that's happened just in our ability to meet together is that we also have chat windows and have the ability to share information. So while we're conversing, if someone wants to ask you a question, they can be doing that. Those questions can be answered by someone else actually while you're presenting and sharing information. So I thought actually collaboration allowed for everyone to have a voice as opposed to just the people who were dominating the floor, if you will, or the video.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Let me ask you one more question related to leadership, and then we got a whole bunch of questions from the audience I want to make sure I get to. And let me ask you about women in technology leadership. You were starting to allude to it at the beginning, but if you were to kind of say, what is the state of the union on women in technology leadership? Where would you say we're at, and what needs to happen going forward?
Okay. Well, I think that if I think about leadership all up, there are these being inclusive is really a fundamental part of great leadership. And so one of the challenges women perhaps have had is their voices haven't been heard in the past, but I see that changing through the amount of investment that corporations, including Microsoft, are putting into diversity and inclusion training to recruiting and to retaining a diverse culture and a diverse group of employees, as well as training on just the methodology of being inclusive for those who may not have exposure to that. So diversity and inclusion programs have been important for women. I think women have suffered greatly with COVID, as much as anyone could possibly have with some of the scenarios I was talking about earlier, right, in terms of the family care. And so that's something that we've been highly sensitive to it as well. But if you think about where we are, I'm looking for some data actually, because I wanted to share some data with you from Microsoft. If I can find it here real quick, I'll bring it up. But I'm encouraged. Here we go. I'm encouraged about the progress that we're making all up as I talk with women leaders in corporations and my customers around the world. But here in Microsoft, 30.9% of our workforce is represented by women, and at the leadership levels, 25%. And so I think we're making some great progress here. We acknowledge that we still have a long way to go. We have, this is not a destination. This is a journey. That what I've just quoted is not a destination, but a journey. But I think offering it's like we were talking before with the workplace, offering that kind of flexibility to all of our workers, including women, which allows you to choose when you're at the office and when you're at home, is part of helping keep women in our workforce, and particularly in technology. I think deliberate, thoughtful succession planning is really important, including career path development for all employees, of course, is important. But being very deliberate and thoughtful for women who may not have had the opportunity to really create their voice yet, helping them develop a voice is one of the things that I have seen missing as I work with women of all cultures and ages in the workforce, is being confident in having a voice. And so providing ways in the development planning that you do with your women employees is finding ways for them to create that and display that is one of the things I think is important to confidence. Mm-hmm. And then clearly, when you're a manager or leader and you have a team of diverse employees, making sure all voices are heard is part of our role as well. And that helps, again, for women to be seen, to be heard, and develop authenticity in terms of their capabilities with the rest of their teammates. And so there are a variety of things here that are subtle, that are part of the day-to-day model coach care that we have for every single one of our employees. And that if we apply it deliberately also to the individual themselves and understand, where they're headed, what they need to get there, help them develop those skills that they might be lacking, and do that very deliberately and definitively together, then there's a chance that women will, one, feel more included, and then two, find their path and their way forward. And such as Gayle Sheppard did when she was a young career person, right, who raises her hand and says, I can be the president of Japan. Well, you can too, right? You just have to believe in yourself. And so sometimes it's belief in ourselves that we have to develop as leaders and others.
Yeah, good philosophy. Let me take one or two other questions here from the audience. Another one that had come in that has been upvoted a lot is the plans that Microsoft's got for Azure Cloud for Healthcare. So what areas of healthcare are strategic for Microsoft? How does Azure fit in and enable new innovation there?
That's a great question. I'm not sure I'm the expert on that, but what I do know is that we are working with some very important what I would call software vendors who are experts in healthcare, to bring them into our platform and to make sure that we take the best of what Microsoft has and offers along with the best in industry to create solutions for healthcare. You think about electronic medical records as foundation for that. You think about AI and machine learning platforms as a foundation for healthcare solutions. These are the types of things that we're organizing and putting together in our industry cloud for healthcare. So we have an industry cloud for healthcare. Mm-hmm. That industry cloud is based on, again, the Microsoft platform, not just Azure, but any of our product groups, whether it be our modern workplace, Microsoft Office, our Dynamics platform, Power platform, and our data and analytics platforms are all considered as part of the infrastructure for a Microsoft cloud. Then very specifically, we look to partner with third parties who are experts in a domain within healthcare and or horizontal, such as an electronic medical records provider, to make sure that we have these solutions that customers are adopting and want to have in their cloud for healthcare. So you might think of us as not fairly young yet in that cloud. These clouds are evolving as we speak, and we're aggressively looking for partners as well to help us build them out. So, to the audience, I would suggest that if you're in healthcare, we'd love to talk with you, and you know how to find me. So, and I can connect you with the right people. I work in the same organization as the industry clouds.
Excellent. Related question to that, the intersection of medical IoT, AI, ML, and healthcare data is crucial to saving lives. How do you balance between innovation and ethical use of data? And Mava, you were alluding to some of this just about the design of technology-based products, but how do you look at that trade-off?
So the question is, how do we
Yeah, it's a balance of data. So basically saying, having access to medical data of all types. I assume it's research.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
And then how do you balance the privacy issue against the need for that data to create real advances?
Well, first of all, Microsoft maintains high privacy standards itself. Data is protected, medical data is protected via HIPAA and some very stringent privacy regulatory rules. And so the implementation of that is built into the systems that we have, whether they're our data systems or in our case of our ISVs, their systems. So that's a first route of protection. That data is not available and not usable in many cases. So I think we have, first of all, that's the basis of trust in which we establish the protection of data privacy. And then furthermore, if you are doing analysis on medical data, then that data, the data I've just discussed that would be regulated under privacy laws or HIPAA, would be excluded from that analysis. So you would not be looking at individuals in specific cases.
Mm-hmm. Good. Let me ask you a last question before we do a wrap up. And this is about how do you advance the adoption of cloud with customers? One of the questions says, there's still a lot of people that are very resistant to kind of the digitization effort, et cetera. What have you found the efforts to really kind of advance a customer's adoption of the cloud?
Well, trust. I think that if there are a couple of reasons why customers wouldn't have adopted the cloud. One is their legacy systems have not yet been migrated to the cloud, or they haven't found a path for how to migrate these legacy systems to the cloud. So part of what we do is provide systems and tooling for to assist with that. That's one of the roles of a team that I have in my organization. In fact, you talked about mainframe migrations. As that team assists in these legacy tools. But I think the opportunity is for us to provide easy paths and access to cloud technology, whether that be skilling. So let's learn about it. And we have Microsoft skilling teams that work specifically around the world. I have a great story about this, where we actually, let me tell you this. I have this story about we had to go out and train. We wanted to go out and train people on how to adopt the cloud. So we launched an initiative to help 25 million people worldwide acquire digital skills. 25 million people. We used data to identify in-demand jobs. So and the skills that were needed to fill them. We built learning paths around that. Our skilling teams built the supporting technology to provide the training. We trained 30.7 million people in 8 months. So the fact that some haven't adopted the cloud yet is true, but the curiosity for how to adopt the cloud is large. And we did that in countries around the world: United States, India, Brazil, United Kingdom, Mexico, Poland, Czech, et cetera, were major participants in this skilling initiative. And so that continues on. That was not a one-time event. And our training and skilling organizations exist inside Microsoft, and we build centers around the world to accommodate that. But I think that in addition to this type of skilling capability, every organization that we have in every country around the world has people who are working on training, educating customers, their teams, providing them roadmaps and journey to the cloud, doing that in a deliberate and thoughtful way that's consistent with the goals that these businesses are trying to achieve, the budgets they have, and the transference of on-prem to cloud, and then working with a series of partners who also provide a variety of hybrid solutions and assistance to the cloud as well, whether they be system integrators or vendors with products that help with that journey. So our ecosystem alone is broad and vast and deep in terms of helping customers get there.
Excellent. Very helpful. Gail, let me do this like I like to end any of the sessions. I'd like to share my takeaways, my so what's from what you shared,
Right.
and give you a chance to upgrade those or give parting comments to the audience about your career advice, other things you'd like to. But I got 4 key takeaways from your comments today. The first one, it's interesting. It reminded me when you talked about your personal ethos, it sounded a lot like the learnings of the book that was written about culture eats strategy for breakfast. Mm-hmm. And basically this idea that you got to get your own personal culture right. And if you do that, it creates a wealth of good in the strategy of your career and everything else. You talked about the importance of having a growth mindset, the importance of asking questions, the importance of kind of thinking about what's in the art of the possible, the importance of being customer focused, people focused. These are deeply cultural things that you basically have used as your software for your career is kind of my first takeaway. My second takeaway is in technology. You talked a lot about technology today, whether it's AI, the use of data, cloud computing, et cetera, is we're in a democratization mode where there's huge democratization opportunities to spread the use of technology that lowers costs and allow people that don't have access to data. You talked about it with climate change, I think, as an example, and even agriculture, sharing data between organizations that creates a 1 + 1 = 3 event. And that digital agriculture, you talked a lot about all the technologies coming together, imagery, IoT, cloud, et cetera. So that was my second takeaway. Third takeaway is on the new normals. And whether it be remote working, healthcare, shopping, entertainment, you talked a lot about collaboration tools. You refer to them in a way that says these are likely to stay. I mean, they may change plus or minus a couple, but we're living in an environment that these have become the new normal. We need to get used to it. You didn't say, well, when COVID's over, we're going to go back and do X, Y, Z. It was much more the genie's out of the bottle, and we're on a path right now that has changed. And then the final one, and it kind of goes all the way back the circle about leadership, leading in COVID, leading in technology, the importance of understanding people, understanding customers, making sure you have systems in place so that you take action against what you're hearing, that you be transparent. And then when we think about more women in leadership and other things, flexibility as an organization, as an employer, will create a win-win to drive more career opportunities, but a win for the organization for better talent availability. Those are the four things I took away. Do you have upgrades on that or parting messages?
Well, I wish I had said it that well, Terry. That was a great summary. So thank you. My parting words are: be curious, be always learning, right? Have a growth mindset, listen well, lean in, ask great questions, speak up, be heard, volunteer for the job, and don't wait to be asked. That's, if you're thoughtful, you listen well, you're caring, and you're generous with your spirit, you have a great growth mindset, and you apply what you learn in real time whenever possible, you're on your way. So, that's the foundation for greatness, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, Gail, you've demonstrated by all the different roles you've had and the success you've had is you've used that same approach, it sounds like, and that's a good set of ingredients for success in almost every environment.
I think so too, Terry.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks again.
Gail, a huge thank you on behalf of our students, our alumni, the broader UCLA community. Lots of great learnings. I hope we can have you come back again very soon and in person, hopefully on our next opportunity.
Thank you so much. All right. Have a great conference. Appreciate it again.